headed to the Pacific Northwest to check in with one of our onX Offroad build competitors, Nate from Dirt Lifestyle. The Dirt Lifestyle YouTube channel focuses on hardcore off-road vehicle building with a focus on serious overlanding that Nate likes to call rock landing. This should give Nate a leg up in this year's competition, considering the fact that in the end, that is the plan for these vehicles. A multi-day trip through the Southwest with a final destination being the annual SEMA show, where all the vehicles will be on display for the public to vote on at this year's event. When I visit each competitor, I'm also asking them to show me how they use onX Offroad in their everyday off-road adventures. And considering the fact that Nate has just moved to this part of the state, he's going to take me on one of his scouting trips to focus on some campsites for him and his family to use in the future. In last year's competition, Nate brought what I would consider one of the smallest vehicles to the event, a Lexus 450 four-door SUV, which is essentially an 80 series Land Cruiser. So that's what we called it for the rest of the competition. In stock form, the vehicle, well, it performed as expected, pretty much ending on the first obstacle that we tackled on Moab Rim. He then took the vehicle back to his shop and modified it using what I would refer to as a less is more plan of attack. Leaving the factory suspension alone, but beefing it up in key areas, focusing on good axle internals inside of the axles, and then leaning heavily on the onX Offroad Elite partners to upgrade the vehicle where it was going to be needed. Method bead grip wheels, Yukon gear and axle internals, a worn winch up front, and then he fabricated a bunch of body protection, bumper up front, bumper in the back, rock sliders, and threw in a minimalistic cage that he needed to meet the rules for our competition. During the competition, the vehicle performed great. Even though it was definitely the smallest vehicle of the group, it did well in every challenge that we threw at it, suffering only minor body damage on the last trail. Nate was able to get himself a second place finish last year, and I think this year he's going to be going for the win. This year, he took the exact opposite approach, showing up to our stock vehicle competition with what I would think is the largest vehicle we have ever seen. A Dodge Ram Extend-A-Cab, long bed, dual rear wheel, Cummins-powered beast. The vehicle performed as expected in our stock vehicle competition, but Nate has some pretty serious plans for the build-up of this Dodge pickup.
This year I'm building a 1982 Jeep J10 pickup truck, and I'm taking all of the best elements of this truck, which is like looks, and I'm putting it on a more robustly built 1-ton Dodge dually frame. During the last competition, I was surprised at how good it did off-road, to be honest with you. It is not designed for those kinds of things, but we had fun with it. I've built many different things from Mild to Wild, but for this build, I just wanted to build something weird and something that's like a Swiss Army knife that can fix trucks, that can tow a trailer down the road, that I could go camp out of, because it does have a bed. And I just wanted to build something that's different, something that's fun, something that has a classic look, and something that's capable of just about everything. I want to build this J10 as a way that it is going to be like full-on service shop on the trail. And what I'm hoping is going to happen is that one of these other builds that are giant builds that are going to be tossed together last minute is going to break down, and maybe I'll have a little leverage in trading some tool access for votes. We'll see what happens. But I think that my strong suit is going to be bringing a shop on the trail with me. So I might, you know, it might not be as capable as, like, I mean, people are bringing buggies basically, but it'll definitely be valuable in like another arena. We dropped the cab onto the dually frame. Things were way closer to where they need to be than I thought they were going to be, which is going to save us some time, and I really like. I'm in the middle of this giant move to a new shop, and it makes it to where I'm dreaming about working on the J10 while actually working on my new shop. So here soon we'll be able to bring it down. We'll be able to replace the dually bed with the, I think it's gonna be a flatbed. Everyone online said they want to see a flatbed on it. And we also need to chop down the frame. There's this big dead space between the cab and the bed that we're gonna chop down, shorten it up, and make it about the same length as the J10 was stock, but with all of the robustness that comes with a 1-ton Dodge dually. My wife and I have been dreaming of moving out in the country and having a little chunk of land all to ourselves. So we moved out in the country. We've got some acreage. We've got lots of space between us and the neighbors, and it is nice and quiet, tons of trees. I even have my own little wheeling trails out here.
We caught up with Nate when he was in the middle of his move into his new house and shop. So even though we're not able to work on the actual vehicle, he did have a pile of parts for me to look at and talk about his plan.
I bought an old worn 8274, and these are as legendary as it gets in the winch game. It's such a perfect aesthetic for this winch, and I'm a sucker for aesthetics. I could absolutely go out and buy a budget-friendly modern winch for this truck, but it just wouldn't look near as cool as this like externally geared, mechanical, clicking sounding, giant drummed winch that is gonna be on the front of this J10. It was laying in his field, and I made an offer, and the reason I got such a good deal on it is because it wasn't listed on Marketplace. So I was able to just make an offer right there in the field. So it's gonna need some work. It'll probably need to sit in like some sort of a penetrant. I had been looking for a good deal on one of these winches because they hold their value like in an insane way, because you can get all the parts still to rebuild them from scratch. So you can get a winch from the 70s and still replace everything. I bet money I'll have the heaviest vehicle of this entire competition based on the parts I'm putting in it.
I don't think I have scales that will weigh this.
From the very beginning, I have wanted to do a manual swap. Manual swaps are very expensive on these trucks because anytime somebody gets one of these manuals, the market has decided that they're worth way more money than I'm willing to spend. But I was able to get an MP203 for dirt cheap, and I was able to get an MP205 for dirt cheap. So instead of upgrading out of the automatic in order to get it geared low enough, I decided to just go with a tried and true, which is the 203 to 205 doubler. And this will give me a lot of flexibility in being able to crawl without overheating that transmission and then kicking it right back into high gear. So when I'm on the freeway, I can still tow, I can still do all the normal stuff you want to do and not worry about blowing up the transfer cases as well. First off, you don't need a dually off-road truck. I want a dually off-road truck. I've owned mini dualies, I love dualies. I want to be able to load crazy weight into the bed of this thing and not worry about what it's going to do to the tires. But one of the big challenges of that is it's going to be a mile wide by the time, you know, I'm going to build some bead locks. We're going to need to widen things out just so the tires don't touch each other. So in order to fix that problem, I found the narrowest dually rear end that you can even buy from the factory. And it's gonna make it to where the outside tires should track just outside of the front tires. That's what I read online, was that there's 3 combinations of axles. You've got the dually size, you have the normal width, like single rear tire, and then you have the cabin chassis size. And the only thing, and it's the same shafts for all of them, it's just a different mixture of the shafts. But it'll give me the flexibility though, of being that much narrower on the trail. I think that if I would have stuck with the dually rear end that's in the truck now, it would just be a mile wide.
Nate has not played the 14-bolt game as long as I have, so I suggested that it would be best to pull the cover off to see if the axle was a limited slip or an open carrier. The limited slip axle requires a new carrier if you want to run a mechanical locker. This would affect his budget in the long run. The good news is this axle is what he was after, an open carrier right from the junkyard.
Wheel options are scarce when you're trying to build an off-road dually. There's just not a lot of off-road dualies out there. So because it's a small market, it makes it to where there's not a lot of aftermarket support. I'm gonna do what I've said for years I will never do again, and I'm gonna do DIY bead locks on this. It is an insane amount of work to have. So many of them end up leaking anyway, but I have a strategy to keep that from happening. I would prefer to just call up method, get a quality set of wheels, use the Elite Partner Program to save some money, but that is not in the cards this year. I'm gonna have to go through and I'm gonna have 2 spares, so I'm gonna build 8 DIY beadlock kits. It'll probably be like a week worth of welding, but it's what I gotta do in order to make it to where I can air down and not lose a bead. And I'm using the factory Ford Super Duty front springs as my front springs. And I'm gonna use the factory Dodge Ram front brakes, which are they're too small, as disc brake upgrade for the rear. Yep. And then I already have a disc brake upgrade built in it with the Ford Super Duty front. So it'll be 2 caliper front, single caliper rear. Yep. So it should stop great with being able to move these, because right now that's just a junk axle. There's nothing I could do with it, so I might as well cannibalize some stuff off of it. Front suspension is gonna be all factory Super Duty. Those 05 and up Super Duty radius arms are huge. And it's a cheap way. I basically just have 2 tabs, just build a bracket, use it, and there's a bunch of different aftermarket versions of those. Like if I decide later on down the road it's just not allowing enough flex, or I'm chewing through bushings or something, like there's upgrades available. Yeah. Like you do with the JKs, where you just put everything on a JK chassis. This is kind of be the same thing. It's like I'll build it to use factory Super Duty stuff and make sure the caster and all that's right. And then if I need to change anything, there's a whole aftermarket catalog of stuff for those.
I've spent some time in the PNW, and I have to say that the number of logging roads through the mountains, well, it's insane. So when Nate offered to let me jump into his Land Rover with him for a quick run to explore some of these roads, I was all in. Plus, with onX Offroad, we could mark out some potential camp spots for his future trips.
We are absolutely spoiled up here with like places to go wheel. Whether I have an appetite for destruction and I'm gonna go out and like rock crawl big rocks, or if I just wanna go out with some of my friends, go camping in the woods, unwind a little bit, we have it all here. I don't get to see Ian very often, and since he's in town, I figured I'd take him up. We'd go try to find some of our Pacific Northwest views. I'd love to find a new view of Mount Rainier, which I haven't done before. So we're gonna use the app to try to figure out the best place to view Mount Rainier coming from a different side of the mountain than what I'm used to. We're working our way through the Cascades, exploring a place that I haven't been to yet. I've never been on this road. So we're using onX to kind of keep on track and try to find a really good view of Mount Rainier if we can get over to that side. It is a gorgeous day, and it's a perfect time to just go out and have fun. I have a couple different strategies when I explore a new place off-road with onX. onX has this tool to where it'll actually suggest which trails are in the area, and I haven't seen that on any other tool. It's amazing that you can just open it up, it makes suggestions. That's one way. Another way, like if I'm camping, I just look for the ends of dirt roads. And so I'll just open up an area. It's very easy to figure out what is BLM land, what is national park, you know, what is public and what is private. So I go to the public lands, I just kind of visualize on the app what things are gonna look like based on elevation, based on what mountains are around there. And I just go hit the trails and see what I can get into. So Mount Rainier is gonna be this way. We wanna be on this side of the road. This looks like a nice little tendricle to try, if it's not washed out. Yep, this one will be on the inside of a mountain. That one should be really close to the top of it. a 2003 Land Rover Discovery, and I got it like 5-6 years ago. It just had a small lift, 32s. I fell in love with it really quickly. I'd always heard bad things about Land Rovers, but it didn't sink in for me for whatever reason. I decided that I wanted to go all in. We fell in love with it quickly. We threw some 1-ton axles under it from Ford Super Duty, put it on 37s, now it's on 39s. And I've just been slowly building it all out from scratch because there's just not a lot of the parts that I want out there in the way that I like them. So just lots of metal work, lots of time, and now it's at a point where I can just go enjoy it. It's been a while since I've taken my old Land Rover out. I've always got all these other projects that I'm juggling, but this was just like the perfect day with the perfect rig to just come out, have some fun. It's cushy, it's comfortable, and I mean, it doesn't get the best mileage, but it's outside of that, it was the perfect vehicle for this trip. I hear tires. It's flat too.
Super flat.
This is a dope-ass campsite.
It's a pretty rad campsite, isn't it? Look at that. Obviously it's been
Oh,
used too.
bro. I could see with the sat view that this was gonna be like a potential campsite. So we're like, hey, let's go there. That should have a view. And sure enough, we show up, it all reflects exactly what the map data gave us. And it's the perfect tool for people like me that are getting more and more into the exploration, overlanding side of off-road. Ian doesn't get to make it up here very often. And I'm so thankful that even in May, which is usually a rainy month for us, he was able to come out and I could show him, you know, my backyard on such a beautiful, perfect day. I mean, it's not even buggy yet. It really is like low key, like the perfect time to come out here if you can accidentally stumble upon weather like this.
After spending the day with Nate at his new shop, I really like where he's headed with this project. Anytime you can take old iron and swap it onto a new chassis, I've got to agree with that decision. You get all those modern conveniences of a new modern vehicle with the classic styling of an old pickup truck. Now, where he's at budget-wise, he's actually in a pretty good spot. We sat down and ran all his numbers with him, and he had receipts or messages from the seller for everything that he's got so far. So his truck, $5,000, which is a good deal for a Cummins powered dual rear wheel truck, but it wasn't in great shape. We saw that at the stock vehicle competition. He got a new front axle and a new rear axle, $600 for the front, $250 for the rear. NP203, $50. The truck cab he already had, so what we did is we looked through Facebook Marketplace in his area and near me, and we found similar truck cabs for sale, and we assessed a value onto that of $250. NP205, $300 and $200 for that worn 8274 winch. Sounds cheap, but it needs a complete rebuild. That winch is completely locked up. I couldn't even get the motor to turn at all. That gives him a total of $6,650 spent so far. Now, don't get me wrong, he has a pile of fab work to deal with this vehicle. Right now, it's essentially just a cab sitting on a frame. There's a lot of work when you do these old trucks on modern frame swaps. Plus, he's got some pretty aggressive plans for the rear suspension, so I think he's gonna have to spend a lot of time on this vehicle. But to have the majority of the parts sitting on the shop floor at just over $6,000, budget-wise, I'm pretty comfortable where he's at. Even though he's dealing with a dual rear wheel, which means you gotta buy 2 extra tires and 2 extra wheels, and then probably a spare on top of that if you want to take it with you. Nate did ask me some rather probing questions off camera, and I think he may have found a small loophole in the rules, and I'm pretty proud of him for figuring this out. He asked me, are tools part of the budget? And honestly, they're not, because anytime you hit the trail, you want to throw your tool bag, maybe your toolbox, whatever you have, you take it with you in case something happens on the trail. But since he's planning to build an off-road recovery repair rig, I told him that anything that could be removable from the vehicle would not count towards the budget. I think he plans to put a full-blown welder, generator, and essentially an entire shop in the back of this truck. And that could come to help him in the long run. Last year, some of our competitors had some issues with their vehicle on the trail. And if Nate is there to help other competitors repair their vehicles, he may be able to barter a little extra budget money from them, or possibly even some votes in the competition. Who knows? We'll see how it all pans out when we hit the road right before SEMA. When we first arrived at Nate's new house, he had a very different plan for taking me four-wheeling. Even though he's building the biggest truck, he also has bought the smallest truck I have ever seen.
Instead of a like side-by-side with a little bed or a John Deere Gator, I decided to buy this weird little Japanese four-wheel drive K-truck. And with Ian being here, I thought it'd be fun to take him on some of these little trails that I've been making.
With all these ferns, I feel like I'm in the forest of Endor. Have you given this place a name yet, Nate? You could do something like Cetane Farms or
Oh, that's a good one.
or something like that.
I think that's it.
Cetane Farms?
Yeah.
I think that'd be perfect.